The summer project was designed as a massive Peace Corps-like operation that would bring volunteers from across the country to Mississippi to expand Black voter registration, organize a Freedom Democratic Party to challenge the whites-only Mississippi Democratic Party, set up freedom schools, and open community centers for adult literacy programs and health and legal assistance. In August 1961, SNCC, which stands for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, went into Mississippi under the leadership of Project Director Robert Moses. By fall 1963, SNCC had joined with CORE, which was the Congress of Racial Equality, SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, to form the statewide Council of Federated Organizations, also known as COFO. So it was a tremendous effort on the part of people throughout this country. And we're going to just enjoy ourselves today, learn something that we didn't know before, and now turn the hands into Syria
rights movement. It was done by a lot of people, not just blacks, not just whites. It took a nation to put it together. So the first song I'm going to sing is God Bless America, because it takes all of us to do it, okay? And when we fight, we win. God bless America.
They were looking for white student volunteers for the Mississippi Summer Project. They wanted the best and the brightest, students at prestigious colleges and universities whose hometown newspapers would cover their involvement in Mississippi, whose parents would use their influence to get the federal government to safeguard the well-being of their idealistic offspring. They were not looking for me. But the brochure that I read in early March of 1964 didn't make those expectations explicit. It was then that I received my first gift from Freedom Summer.
Paul and Silas stuck in jail, had no money for to go to bail. Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on.
The voice that broke through to me that night was the voice of Fannie Lou Hamer. It came from the pit of her being, from the depths of her heart. And it told me that if you have a voice, any voice, doesn't have to be the outstanding, extraordinary voice of Fannie Lou Hamer or Syria T. Berry, you can use it. You can use it. And the words that she sang also spoke to me. Keep your eyes on the prize. At the opening session, Mrs. Hamer spoke to us. We need you. Help us communicate with white people. Regardless of the things they do, there's some good there. We got to reach them. We knew that we were going into danger and that everything we had learned over the past week in our role plays of physical attacks and arrests might be called upon in the weeks to come. A billboard welcomed us to the Magnolia State, and there, arrayed along the side of the highway, a gathering of state police cars. There were tensions in the office. Many of the longtime staff were not totally convinced about the wisdom of having white know-it-all college students flooding the area, making it look as if African Americans were not the agents of their own liberation. People were reluctant to register to vote, and for good reason. It was very difficult for Black applicants for voter status to pass the tests. Black applicants would have to interpret various passages from the state constitution and respond correctly to such questions as, how many bubbles are in a bar of soap? In 1961, only 25 of the 7,495 eligible African American citizens in Hattiesburg were registered to vote. Then came Freedom Day in January of 1964. It was followed by what was called the Perpetual Picket that lasted for several months. During that time, 100 African American citizens attempted to register to vote. Most were denied, but along the way, evidence was gathered that showed Theron Lind was in violation of the Civil Rights Act, which had just passed Congress on Juneteenth, 1964. The Justice Department sought a permanent injunction against Lind, but it was a mixed victory since the federal government did nothing to enforce voting rights. It was a summer of violence in Mississippi. The Ku Klux Klan rapidly took in new members, peaking at 6,000, 52 claverns statewide. They committed hundreds of acts of intimidation, burned 65 homes and other buildings, including 44 Black churches. They murdered Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, and at least 5 other people. 1,000 movement people were arrested. 80 activists were severely beaten, some of them school-age children hit with wrenches. The FBI took notes, but there was no federal protection.
Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou. Fannie Lou. I come before you as Fannie Lou Hamer. I was born in 1917 in the Mississippi Delta. Oh, that land was rich and fertile. The soil. Oh. But the only thing rich about Mississippi was the land and the people who owned it. I am a Negro. That's what they call people with skin who was dark all the way to a little bit of brown. Negro was the nice way to say it. My parents was James and Luella Townsend, and they were sharecroppers, and they had 20 children, and I was the baby. And we grew up hungry and barefoot. When it was cold in the wintertime, our mama would get some material or newspaper to wrap around our feet. By the time I was 27 years old, I married Perry Hamer. Oh, we loved one another. We loved one another. He was a sharecropper. He ran the tractor for Mr. Marlowe, and I was the timekeeper. So when the sharecroppers would come in with their long white sacks filled with cotton, I would measure it. I had honest scales. Oh, those men, James Foreman and Bob Moses, they were talking about, they were said that the Negro has the right to vote. I am 44 years old. I had never knew that before. I had the power to make a change in the system, and I never knew that. They asked for volunteers. Ooh, yes. Oh, a couple of days later, it was August 31st, and I got on a bus. There was about 18 of us going over to Indianola, which was where the Sunflower County Registrar's Office was located. And we got on that bus. We were happy. We were proud. We were going to go and register to vote to make a difference. We had power in our hands. But then on Route 49, there was trucks coming by with white men and their rifles and their dogs and yelling obscenity to us. And everyone's head went down on that bus. But no, something sprang up inside of me, and I started to sing, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine." And we kept on singing that all the way, and other songs go telling on the mountain, and we can't be turned around. We kept singing freedom songs after freedom songs. And then we got into Indianola. And we got to the state building, and there was policemen with their dogs and their rifles and their Billy Jacks. And we were told only 2 people could come in to register. I got right up. I got right up. I'm going to get in there. And I got in there and I wrote my name down. Ooh, Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer. My address, Mr. D. Marlowe's Plantation. And I just filled out all of the registration forms. I knew I passed that part, and SNCC, they paid for my poll tax. Oh, yes. In the oral exam, they asked about a de facto law. No, I don't know about a de facto law. So my registration didn't take that day. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. No, I'm going to come back. And I did come back later on, another time, another month. And my registration did take. And I got a registration card. Fannie Lou, Mr. Marlowe himself has been here, and he is so mad about what you done did. And then Mr. Marlowe himself, he come in his truck, and he is mad, and he is angry. Fannie Lou, what did you done do? Mississippi ain't ready for this. No, you got to go back there, and you have to unregister yourself, unless you're going to have to get off of this plantation. Oh, no, 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 you're going to have to get off of this plantation anyway. Mr. Marlowe, sir, I didn't go there to register you. I went there to register myself. Ooh, I had to get off of that plantation right away, and I moved in with Ma Tuck. They took us into the booking room and then to a cell. And we could hear the beatings and the lickings and the screamings and the screamings and the lickings that was coming from the different cells. Then it was my turn. And I was put into a jail cell with 2 Negro prisoners. and the policemen handed their billy jacks to the 2 Negro prisoners, and they beat me. Oh, they beat me. One until he was exhausted, and then the other one till he was exhausted. And when I began to scream, there was a white man in a suit sitting in a chair, and he hit me in my face and told me to hush up. I was in that prison, that jail cell, when Medgar Eggers was shot down in his driveway one night when he was getting out of his car, going into his home. They sent 2 men to bail us out. But when the first man got to that jail, they arrested him and beat and tortured him. The second man came, they beat him and tortured him. Andrew Young came, and they accepted his bail money. I continued on being a civil rights worker. I continued on when I got better. But somehow, some way, I was seated before TV cameras. And I spoke about what happened to me on Mr. Marlowe's plantation when I had tried to register to vote. I talked about what happened to me in that jail cell where I was beaten so bad. And then I said, is this really America? Is this really, I question America. Is this really the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our phones off of the hook because we keep getting so many death threats throughout the night? Is this really America? All we want is to lead decent lives. Ooh. Hundreds of telegrams went into the White House the next day, and all of the country was like, what is happening in Mississippi? And I could tell you this much, is that change was coming to Mississippi. Ooh, yes, that change was coming, that change was coming, that change was coming, it was here. Now, do you know how to spell Mississippi? Why don't you spell it with me? Mississippi.
I hugged Barbara goodbye. And then I hugged Mr. Walker. And before I could get to Mrs. Walker, she came up to me and grabbed me in this tight embrace. And then she stepped back and she put her hands on my shoulders and she said to me, one day you gonna tell your mama what you done here. And she gonna be proud. That was one of the gifts from Freedom Summer, that assurance. I studied at the Robert Moses School of Insightful Compassionate Leadership, and I attended the Fannie Lou Hamer University of Universal Love and Fearless Truth-Telling. How could I not be shaped and strengthened and moved beyond my awkwardness into the future?